Hey, what's up guys, Metal571 here, and as I once said a couple of years ago, this may be the moment you've all been waiting for. Here, I have with me the ZMF Eikon and the ZMF Atticus. And we're going to take a look at them in depth, and as usual, we'll start out with what are these actually intended for. And both of these wonderful wooden audiophile headphones are closed backs with an impedance of 300 ohms. The Eikon, which I have here in Padalk wood, very beautiful. My camera really does not do it justice. Has a biocellulose driver, which is not unlike the THX00 and the TH900. No, it's not the same driver, but it is a similar material. And the Atticus uses a more traditional TPE, or thermoplastic elastomer. This example I have here is the cherry wood version of the Atticus. So as far as the build quality goes, and you guys kind of know what I'm going to say, because these headphones are both kilobuck class, so naturally you expect fantastic build quality. Is it there? Now you can tell that these are built by hand, and they are. Very, very carefully hand assembled, which is both good and bad. First of all, you get kind of that, hand touch. You can really see that it's very carefully made, but you can see some very, very minor, some possible artifacts from like sanding inside the cups. Very, very small imperfections. Both of these headphones I have here are actually B-stock items because they're review units, so they have minor blemishes. You can hardly notice it on this one, but anything you see on this video that doesn't look right on the wood as I turn the headphones around will not be there, rest assured, if you buy them brand new. Definitely not. So that won't be a problem, but for the most part the Eikon is the better looking one of these two, and the Padalk wood. It seems like the Atticus is a little bit more obvious blemish right around here, but things like that don't exist on the, this is what the wood cups will actually look like, both sides, when you buy them brand new. Nevertheless, that does not affect the sound of these at all, but like I said, getting back to the build, you can tell that they're built by hand, but at the same time, they're still built with really good materials. These pads are, you can kind of tell. They're very soft. They're made of real leather. You're using a lot of metal throughout, which makes it heavy, but also but very sturdy. You can feel that. And the headband actually can be bent to your liking. You can bend it depending on how you want the fit. And then there's two spokes here that you can adjust like that to adjust the height. And they actually fit pretty well, even though they are fairly weighty. One complaint I had, which I thought was weird, was how the driver just, you can just rotate this around 360 degrees. I think that's a little bit janky, to be honest, but at the same time, it does allow the cups to rotate in whatever direction you want, pretty much. So it definitely will not have a problem with fit with these, because look at how much adjustment there is. There's just so much. But I feel like there should have been maybe some stops on each end so that they don't rotate freely. But that's a really minor gripe. Other than that, I feel like they're going to last forever, made of really strong materials. As far as accessories go, you get, I don't have the stock cable with me, but I do have the upgrade cable that you can buy in addition to the stock cable, the OFC. So this is, it's two mini XLRs, one for each channel, and terminated balanced. I just have this cable wrapped. And the balanced has, of course, a single-ended adapter here at 1/4 inch. And so that's the upgrade cable. But you will get both the stock cable and the upgrade cable if you order the upgrade cable. You also get a case, standard. Yes, standard. This guy, really serious ZMF headphones case. He's not messing around. Very, very strong. Very, very likely to protect your headphones in a major nuclear war. And you also get a ZMF headphones card. Of course, this one's blank because this is just a review unit, but yours will have your name on it, the date, and type of headphone on this side. I believe Zach signs these individually as well. So you get all of that for your money. So you do get quite a bit there. And like I said, the OFC cable that I have here is an upgrade. Now, comfort. This applies to both. Everything I'm talking about so far applies to both headphones, unless I talk about one or the other. When we get into the sound, I'm going to do one headphone at a time, since this is like a group review of the two. But because the build's about the same on both of them, when I hold up one and talk about the other, it's the same basic design. The real difference between these is that they have different drivers, so they sound quite a bit different. They have different woods in this case as well, so that also affects the sound, which I'll get into a little bit later. So as far as comfort goes, these are pretty heavy. They're around 500 something grams, and they definitely are weighty. However, as you saw earlier, because the pads are so thick and plush, they actually distribute the weight really well, and I didn't really have a problem putting these on my head and listening for long periods. So even though they weigh a lot, comfort really was not a negative for me. That's something to keep in mind. So with the build and the accessories and the comfort out of the way, now let's talk about the sound. Now, as I usually I'll start with the bass, but in this case, I'm also going to start talking about the Eikon, and then I will go back to the Atticus and describe that sound. So starting with the Eikon, this is a Padauk wood Eikon, as I said earlier. So the bass on this guy, so first of all, the bass is very warm. It bleeds into the mids a bit, around 200 to 300 hertz. A little bit too much, in my opinion, to sound neutral, but it also has amazing extension and fantastic slam. Really, really love the bass on the Eikon. Probably my favorite part of it by far. And it hits, as I have from my notes here, it hits with amazing authority and minimal distortion. It really does sound like that. It is awesome. The bass is just shy, I would say, of my own preference in the amount of bass quantity. It doesn't really get in the way of the mids and the upper mids, but it does have some warmth in the 200, 300 hertz area that I felt was not quite neutral. So that's something to keep in mind. That kind of is the way it is for both of these headphones, but on the Eikon, you definitely have some of that, but you also have a very flat extending bass, but it's also boosted. I gave it 1 more dB of energy, but you don't really need to. Now, the mid-range of the Eikon. So the Eikon is not a very, how do I put this? The Eikon is not a very forgiving headphone. The mids are forward, but they're carefully placed forward of the rest of the spectrum in that they are aggressive in a way, but not to the point where it can become fatiguing for well-recorded music. That's what I want to emphasize here. The upper mid-range here, very, very good timbre. Not really any problems with it, but it is a little aggressive to me, so I turned 4K down by about 2 dB. You'll see that in my EQ. And other than that, very, very fast. No problems with transients in the mids. For a closed headphone, really fantastic. Of course, all the other reviewers have said the same thing. I am totally in agreement with that. The treble here, also, again, continuing with the more reference sound of the Eikon, a bit forward. I found 6K to be a little peaky, 10K to be a little peaky, my usual spots. But of course I prefer a darker sound, so the Eikon was definitely more of a reference, and that's really what it's intended for, more of a reference sound. So I thought it was forward by about 3 dB or so, between 6 and 10K. But again, it's not necessarily sibilant and bright unless you're really listening to something that's probably been poorly mastered. It really it brings forward the nuance in really, really good recordings with a lot of detail. But if you feed it crap, it will give you crap. And that is really the point of the Eikon. It really makes very well-recorded music shine fantastically. That's what I want to emphasize there. The air and the mid-treble is all there. No details are really lost here. It's a closed headphone, so don't expect it to be exactly on the level of some open backs, but among closed backs, it's definitely the best I've heard so far, without question. And that brings me to the soundstage. Wow. Yeah. This is a winner. This is probably the closed back to get. Overall, in terms of soundstage, it has single-handedly the best imaging I have ever heard, period, on a closed-back headphone. And the soundstage width is also not bad, but it's quite nicely, it has a nice balanced amount of width. It's not crazy wide. It's not like an open headphone wide, but it's quite wide for a closed back. And the imaging is insane. Like, I cannot believe, you will forget that you're wearing a closed back headphone very often until you get used to the Eikon. You're going to put on a different closed back and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I was wearing a closed back before? Wow. And yeah, it really is like that. Awesome soundstage. So the Eikon overall, of course, as I've been saying here, it's more of a reference, it's more of an aggressive tone, which I think is really good for some types of music, which I'll go on about a little bit more after I'm done describing the Atticus than others. And now to the Atticus bass for the Atticus. Now the Atticus does not have as much of a flat bass. It's more of a mid bass focused headphone, as Zach describes on his website. It's true. Around 100-150 hertz, you've got a boost there that's a little bit greater than the amount of energy in the Eikon in the mid bass. And the bass does not extend as well because it's more of a focus on the mid bass, but it definitely still can produce frequencies down to the very, very low sub bass. It's just tuned to have more bloom in the mid bass. And I found that on this unit, I did not have as much impact in the bass, did not have as much dynamics here. Even though it was capable of producing bass that went very low with EQ, it still did not hit as hard as the Eikon did. And that is partially due to the wood used here, cherry. You can switch that out. More on that a little bit later. So I did fill in the sub bass that was missing with some EQ, and certainly did not have any problems after that. But it really is more of a mid bass focused bass line. I prefer the bass on the Eikon, honestly, but then there's the rest of the Atticus. So moving on to the mid-range, wow, I love the mid-range of this headphone. It is so smooth. It is so non-fatiguing. And so it's a lot more laid back than the Eikon, and a lot of people will find it a little bit boring and maybe even too far pushed back. But for me, it's like perfect. It's like Odyssey upper mids, really relaxed, liquidy smooth. Just you have to listen to this thing. I love the mid range, and with the bass, I guess I missed this about the bass, but yeah, there's still some upper bass bleed on this headphone as well, just like the Eikon. Upper bass, low mids, whatever you want to define it as, around 200 to 300 hertz. There's more energy there than there should be, and it extends into that mid bass hump. And then you have the mid range, which is very, very smooth, very, very laid back, very, 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 very quick. Maybe not quite as fast and detailed as the Eikon, but still just so good. I love metal on this headphone. I love electric guitar distortion on this headphone. So good. No EQ. I didn't apply anything to the mids. The treble here also much more laid back than the Eikon, but I actually found that at 10K, this headphone has a larger peak than the Eikon did at 6 and 10K. So at 6K, there's actually a dip on this headphone, and on the Eikon, there were peaks at 6 and 10K, so it's more filled in. This one is kind of like a dip and then a spike at 10K. So it's still easy to correct with EQ if it bothers you at all, but I think it'll add nice sparkle to any recording while maintaining that smooth liquid mid area. So, and the air, wow, so good. I actually prefer a bit of a dip around 6K in the low treble in the sibilance region, kind of like an HD650, HD600. And it just allows the air to like be clearer to me, to sound awesome. This, oh man, the upper treble in this headphone, I cannot have enough superlatives for it. It is so good. And especially clean for a closed back. Now the soundstage here is a little bit different than Eikon. Atticus is, and partially, as far as I know, it's partially due to the thicker pads on the Atticus that there's a larger soundstage. However, the imaging is not quite as holographic, it's not quite as very specific. You can place the instruments. So the imaging's a little bit blurrier, but you get a larger stage. So in such a way, it sounds a little more K701-esque. And I like that. I think it's fun, if not more reference. And it goes with the rest of the sound signature of the Atticus, which is more laid back and more fun sounding. So for the pads, apparently I don't have the velours out at the moment. Oh, here they are. Not prepared for the review, Metal. Come on. So with the pads, what's going to be available starting, I believe, this week is what Zach tells me, is there's some velour pads that you'll be able to purchase for the Ori pads, which is what the Atticus uses, and the Eikon pads in velour for the Eikon, of course, which has its own pads. So with these, you get about the same isolation as the pads are built in here, the leather pads. But of course, some people prefer the velour, and these are more like a DT770 material. They're quite thick and densely packed, so you get a good amount of isolation here. And my only difference I noticed in sound when using the velours is that you get less of that low mid-range upper bass bleed into the mids when using these pads. But isolation remains almost the same. The rest of the sound signature is almost untouched in my experience. So this may be the first time a reviewer is talking about these, so watch for these. They'll be on the store as an option soon on ZMFheadphones.com. Now, wood. So changing the hardness of the wood changes the sound a bit. From what I'm told, and kind of my experience here as well, is Padauk is the harder wood. It's denser, and because of that, it leads to a faster sound with a little bit more detail and a little bit faster attack. So really, the Eikon is usually it's usually advertised with Padauk because it is the more aggressive reference headphone, and then the Atticus lends itself pretty well to Cherry, which is the softer wood, which does not hit with as much authority, but provides a smoother sound. So that's the difference you have with the woods. Other woods may be available in the future. I can't say which ones because that's up to Zach. But these are the main two woods. There's another one, camphor, that's available as well. Isolation. I actually found the isolation slightly better on the Eikon. It might be because the pads are not as thick on the Eikon, but of course they're plenty deep enough for your ears. They're just excessively deep on the Atticus, which ships with the Ori pads. But I found both perfectly fine for regular listening volumes in the office. The Atticus might just be my favorite office headphone, of course, other than the B&O H6, but that's for another review. So you won't really have a problem with isolation with these. Even though they look like they're vented, they're actually not vented very much, only a little bit. And actually only some of these vents are open if needed to retune the headphone to be correct. And that's done per ear cup, if I remember correctly. But again, these are closebacks, so think of them as closebacks despite having one vent or no vents open. Genre pairing, again, like I said, the Eikon is better for well-recorded tracks. I think for classical jazz, very, very well-produced rock, I think these are fantastic. They'll bring forward all the little details in the recording that you're looking for because of their additional treble energy and mid-range energy. Very, very honest headphone. And the Atticus is more of an all-rounder. I liked it better because of that. But in terms of some technicalities, like I was describing in the sound, it may not be quite on the same level. But I like its tuning better, however. Amp needs and changes. So I had the opportunity to hear both of these headphones on a wonderful combo of the Metrum Amethyst and the Euphoria tube amplifier. And I have to say that even though both of these can run off of a phone, believe it or not, despite being 300 ohms, they got quite loud from my Pixel XL, which I'm about to upgrade to the Pixel 2 XL. And even though they can do that, when you pair them with something really nice and really powerful and warm, they are superb. And the soundstage can open up further. I heard that compared to what I was reviewing with before, which was the Magni 2 Uber, Modi 2 Uber, I've since switched to the Magni 3 and Modi Multibit, or MIMBI. But when I was reviewing with the Magni 2 Uber, Modi 2 Uber, switching to the Metrum, Amethyst, and Euphoria, I found that the treble was smoother, not surprisingly, because the Magni 2 Uber tends to have a little bit of glare in the mid-treble. That's true. And yes, Metal 571 really just did say that there's a difference in amps, because there is. And I found with the DAC, actually, believe it or not, the DAC was the main source, in my experience, of additional bass dynamics, so that they could hit with more authority and more dynamics in the bass. There was a larger difference between low and high levels of bass in the music. I thought that was fantastic with the Amethyst compared to the Modi 2 Uber. So yes, I just did say DAC sound different. Is the world ending? No. That's just called A-being. So if you have a fantastic setup with an expensive DAC and amp, wow, these will definitely benefit, clearly. Alright, burn-in. Now this is a funny category. Everyone's going to be like, what? This review is way different than anything I've done before, because I've spent so much time with these, so I want to tell you everything I know about them. Burn-in. Yes, apparently it's a real thing with the Eikon in particular, is what I noticed it with. So when I first listened to these, and even though these were B-stock, they had all new drivers, so they were fresh, and listening within the first couple of hours, I started to notice that the bass developed more, and it was a little anemic at first. Bear with me. Now, the reason why this may be possible is because these are not a normal kind of driver. These drivers have surrounds on the driver, and that may contribute to them burning in and changing a bit more than other drivers on other headphones. So this is very unusual. Everyone who knows me knows I really don't believe in burn-in very well. But in the case of these headphones, it is worth, if you don't like the Eikon at first, I would totally set it going with like hardcore metal and hard style and EDM and crazy bass music for like, I don't know, 100 hours, and then come back to it and see if it's any different, because it sounded like it changed a bit for me. Nothing crazy, but I think the bass in particular opened up more than when I first got them. Headphone comparisons. I'm probably going to start adding this category when possible. So I have an Ether C floating over there in the background that a viewer sent me recently that I want to use as a comparison point to these. Now the Ether C compared to the Eikon and the Atticus, it has a much more clinically neutral sound without any of this like bass warmth or it's a less colored sound. It's a very dead kind of neutral sound without any bass boost, but it totally lacks the refinement in the treble and the mids that actually both of these headphones really have more of. Even though it may be a better frequency response for audio pros, I found the soundstage much more closed in the Ether C. And the weight is lower on the Ether C, however, than these headphones. But like I said, the refinement and the detail was not there. Now, this is not the Ether C Flow. I've not heard the Ether C Flow yet. So if you have an Ether C Flow, send one in. Hint. Just email my business email in the About section. So with the Eikon, compared to that, I don't think there's really a competition there. The Eikon is a much better overall headphone for enjoyment. Alright, now we finally come to the conclusions for this review. So for the Eikon, I think that it could be described as the HD800 to the Atticus's HD650. If you like the Blackwood, I would buy the Eikon. This is really the takeaway here. Blackwood had that kind of reference sound. It's aggressive, but it is very, very capable, and it responds well to EQ if you want to mess with that as well. Definitely the most capable overall closeback I've heard on the market, especially in terms of soundstage and detail retrieval. But without EQ, I actually prefer the Atticus personally. And even though it's not quite as resolving as the Eikon in some ways, it's a smoother and not nearly as capable version of the Eikon sound. So more of an HD650 to the Eikon's HD800. If you like the Vibro though, and it sounds a lot like the Ori I heard in the past as well. I reviewed, it was called the Omni at the time, the Omni Blackwood. That's kind of more the Atticus's speed. So I want to also emphasize that these headphones are not really something targeted toward general consumers. They're made by an enthusiast for enthusiasts. And as a result, they are expensive. The Atticus is $1,000, and the Eikon, I believe, is about $12.99. I'll double check that, and of course, put that in the description. Depending on what wood you get as well, it changes the price a bit. But they come with a lifetime warranty. They're made to order, and they come with some great accessories, and they sound superb. So there you have it, guys. That's the ZMF Eikon and the Atticus. I want to thank Zach Merbach personally for this video. Thanks for sending these review units out and giving me so much time to spend listening to them and evaluating them. They are great. Go out and have a listen and enjoy. See you guys.